he told me he was going to retire. We sat on the couch, we were across from each other, and he looked at me and he said, if this doesn't get better, I'm retiring after this year. And I was like, this is not good, because I know that he loves to play football. It's very clear that he loves to play football. And I think football means something a little bit different to him now after going through all of this. But I was like, you've never talked about retiring and been serious, like, on a timeline. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of that night that I started to kind of freak out, because there were a lot of things. It was like, okay, we've been through some physical stuff in the past. Like, you never want to see your loved one in any type of pain. So I'm like, okay, we can, we've kind of handled the physical stuff. Like, let's continue to work on that. But this mental stuff is serious. And so that's the next day I was like literally bawling, and I called his agent. I called our financial advisor first, and I was like, we've got to do something about this now, because they've been with us for a long time. They're more like friends and family than like people who we work with. And I was like, this is not good. And like a lot of times when people needed to know how Braden was doing, they'd call me, not really talk to him, because he's very quiet and kept things kind of like under wraps. And so when I was like, this is serious, we need to do something now. And then both of those people have had experience with guys who've retired, who've had, some mental health stuff. So they took it very seriously from the jump. It was like, okay, like, what can we do? What does he need? The player that was here, he's also with our agency. So it was really helpful to talk to him about, hey, like, what did you do to get out of this situation? How do we help Braden in this situation? And it took a little bit of time to find the right person. We had 2 different therapists that he was talking with. Okay. One that was more OCD specific, and then one that wasn't. The thing is that with their availability, it's really hard to get the kind of help you need during season. And people were trying to work with us as much as they could, but on top of just the body maintenance that he does outside of work, he was doing a lot of stuff. He was doing hours and hours of stuff outside of work to try to be mentally and physically okay to keep playing. And one thing that he didn't mention that I think is relevant is that every single time we got closer to game day, he got worse. So it was like Sunday nights, he was fine. Mondays, he was okay. Tuesdays, he was kind of okay. Wednesdays, like, the cycle started to pick up. Thursdays were the worst days. Fridays were pretty bad. Saturdays were, like, getting worse. Sunday mornings were really bad.
Just like the stress just in general of the week, like, it had a part to play with, like, if I couldn't do, like, my compulsions and stuff like that. And it's also, like, my OCD latches on to, more critical moments. It's like, if I have these thoughts, like, during a game, like, I'm not going to be able to do my compulsions, and it's going to feel really real. And it's just like that stress that continually built up. Being by myself was not good for me during that. Like, would be away games, like, I'd be in a hotel room, even if it, like, I wouldn't want to self-isolate, but I would isolate, because basically it kind of forces me to isolate, because I don't want to see people to see me constantly, like, doing my compulsive prayer or, like, saying my things over and over, because, if something bad came into my mind, I'd have to offset it a certain amount of times, like, with the good, essentially.
Right.
So, it was just that stress constantly, because, there was times before games where I was in a really bad spot, and there was one game this year where, like, I almost didn't even play, because, like, my mind was such in a bad headspace. And, I called her, basically told her, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this today. And that was very real. And, I'm just like, it's just that constant stress of wondering, like, when is my OCD going to pop up? And it could pop up at any time, like, especially in, like I said, critical moments. Like, it always, like, pop up there. I feel like before the Jets game, it was a Saturday. Drove up, was supposed to be here, got to the parking lot. I went in to talk to our player personnel guy. Turned right back around. Like, told him, like, I can't do this today. I need to go home. Like, I'm in a bad headspace. And that's, like, when I got, they're trying to figure out what to do. Like, obviously they want me to play, but they also want me to be right in the head. And I told them that, I'm going to be ready. I'll be on the plane. And, that's when they got me, a prescription to go on some pharmaceuticals. And, this is my first time really taking, like, actual pharmaceuticals for, like, something like that. So I didn't really know what it was, but,
We had talked about it before, though. There were a couple of games after the one that he almost didn't play, there were a few where he was like, and for him, we're very holistic. So for him to come into the house and the first thing that he says is like, hey, I think I need to go on medication for this.
Yeah.
And my response was, we need to make sure we're doing this right, because he's large. He has a very fast metabolism. He doesn't take Advil. I mean, you know, so I was like, we need to really just kind of be cautious about how this is done. Because I've heard like people have different experiences on pharmaceuticals. Some people it works really well for. Some people it takes like 3 or 4 tries to find the right prescription or whatever. And we didn't have the luxury of that time. And so when it came to like us weighing the options of the pharmaceuticals, they told him like it'd probably be 3 months before this even started to really work. And I was like, well, at that point, if it's 3 months, we're in off season. So is it really like the drugs that are helping, or is it off season, or what is it? So they put him on 2 different things, one that was more fast acting and one that was going to take a few months to kind of work. And that made me nervous because the fast acting one, and it's nobody's fault that this happened. We didn't have the time. And I was the first one to, when this happened, I called his psychiatrist or psychologist that he was talking to, and we got hooked up with a psychiatrist. So we were all on the phone at the same time trying to figure out how we can get him okay. Because he didn't want to not play. So that was like not an option. It was, how are we going to get him through this weekend? Like, we'll worry about Monday when that comes around. And so, but the pharmaceuticals didn't make him feel like himself. And so as his wife, I didn't want him going out there and playing when he didn't feel like himself, because football's a dangerous game, and you don't want to be trying to wrestle 300-pound men if you don't feel all with it. So it was definitely a scary option, but it was one that, you know, I didn't want to support, I guess, because I wanted it to be right, but we had to. Like, it was too late. We had to.
It was kind of like, you know, you try the therapy option, then you do the pharmaceuticals. And it's like you're steadily trying different things. And then as you go down that list, and then, you know, obviously got to intensive therapy. Intensive therapy didn't work. So, you know, regular therapy, pharmaceuticals, and intensive therapy, like, nothing was really working. One of the biggest parts with OCD is like recognizing that it is the OCD, because you feel like so much it is you, like you feel that's your identity. So kind of like sorting through that, like actually like seeing that it is my OCD, that was the hardest part. And when I couldn't see that, like, therapy doesn't help. It helps in the short term, but then it's like, no, this is still me. Your mind finds different ways, like, no, that really is you, like this, that, and the other, like connecting the dots in your mind, going down different rabbit holes. And like, you know, when I was at the mental health facility, like Courtney was talking about, like I did TMS, like I did 30 sessions of that, and you know, that's supposed to be good for OCD.
And they put like a cap on and like shock you.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like just another talk therapy.
No, yeah, that's like
situation.
modality, yeah. Did ketamine therapy, did 6 sessions of that. But yeah, I mean, and we were kind of in desperation mode, and I kind of also talk about, like, in the season, like, I wasn't even, like, toward the end, before, like, I left, like, I wasn't even going to meetings, like, I was like, give me the stuff that I need to know, but whenever I sit idle, like, in a film room, like, my mind starts to drift, and when I'm in a dark room, no one to talk to, really, and that made me very uncomfortable, because that's when my mind would drift, and I would go into those very dark places, and, you know, but those were very prominent. So I wasn't even going to meetings. Like, I was doing everything I could at that point just to still be out there, but I was just getting to the desperation point. And
well, the team was trying to help you too. Like, the team was trying to work with him.
They were
make it work.
Very good with, like, obviously, like, allowing me to, like, give me the information I need. Like, you don't have to go to meetings if that's going to put you in a bad place. Get me on pharmaceuticals, let me do therapy. Like, they're willing to work with me. I mean, obviously they let me go to the mental health facility, and, you know, most clubs wouldn't allow that, and they didn't put any type of penalty on me or anything like that.
What happened is that it was the day before Thanksgiving, and he was supposed to come in, and I think that you went to breakfast, and then he just got up and left. And so then at that point, I got a call from Braden's agent, who had talked to the GM and talked to the player personnel guy and been like, Braden's not doing well. And so at that time too, it was like people knew that he wasn't doing well. Like, people could tell that he wasn't himself. And so I think there was a lot of, you know, do we pull him out of football? And at the time, I was terrified to do that because I thought that was like one of the only things that was kind of like keeping him going, because no one wants, this is, even though we're not a super well-known family in the Colts organization with like people outside of the organization, if you say, hey, I'm leaving football, and we had to put it as personal reasons, and people who know Braden, they thought that something was wrong with me, they thought something might have been wrong with our son, like there just were a lot of questions, and I didn't think that that was something that we really needed to add onto our plates if we didn't have to. And so when I was talking to his agent, you know, he was like, we're all worried about him, like he's not doing well, and at this point it's bigger than football, and all of us know that. And so those were the exact words. And so they were like, we'll figure out whatever he wants to do. And at that time, he was taking a nap at home. I'm like, y'all, give me a second. Let me see how he's doing. Because sometimes he would come home, he'd take a nap, and he'd feel a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of like thought about it for a minute, and I walked in the house, and he had woken up, and I just looked at him, and I'm like, he's not there. Like, there was no coming back. And so I sat there, and I was like, hey, like, this is not good. And we have a 10-month-old. And it's almost Christmas, you know, it's the day before Thanksgiving, and I'm like, you know, this is supposed to be the happiest time. And I just looked at him, I'm like, you got two options, and I'm going to tell you what I think that you should do. Because a lot of it, I think, is that these guys, being athletes, they want to do what's best for their team. They need to do what's best for their family. And sometimes they don't feel like they have permission to be humans, let alone to do what they really need to do to be okay. And so I told him, I'm like, you know, the options are you continue to take this medication, you go to therapy pretty much every single day, and we're going to figure out a way to get you through the season. We were 1 week from bye week. I'm like, maybe we can get you through this week. We can get you to bye week. We can get you some more intensive help, and then you can finish the season. Like, we can figure that out. We can try to do that. I said, your other option is that you need to go to a facility. And I said, and Braden, like, I'm looking at you, and I think you need to go to a facility. And he was like, and he just put his head down, and he was like, yeah. And I said, and I need you to give me all your guns. I need you to give them all to me. I'm going to go put them in the safe, and I'm going to change the combination, and you're not going to have access to any of this stuff because this is not something that I'm playing around with. Like, we have a young son. You've worked too hard to we're not going out this way. Like, we're just going to figure it out. And so from that point, I think that there was a lot of relief very temporarily with like, okay, like I can figure out a way to take care of myself and my family. And so then it was just trying to find the right place for him. And there were a lot of different options. He didn't necessarily go to an OCD specific facility, but a lot of those facilities just didn't look like it fit his needs. I mean, being a professional athlete, talking about, you know, going to a hospital setting where you're not really like able to be outside or do any of that stuff. So we had talked about a couple different places, and we settled on a place in Colorado. And then it was just like, okay, how fast can we get you there? And of course, being over like a holiday weekend, we couldn't get him in until the next week. And so the Monday of bye week, he flew out to Colorado, and that's where he was until I went and picked him up mid-January or late January. And so it was really scary. And you never want to see someone like that. And you don't want to tell your husband, I'm sorry, but like, you don't need to be around our kid by yourself. Like, it was that bad. Like, I didn't trust him at home by himself with our baby. And it wasn't because I didn't trust him. It was because if he had a cycle that he couldn't come out of, I mean, our kid was crawling. Like, there's in an instant something can happen with a child. And I was like, we just don't have that luxury of like, there was not enough of a protection for him or for our baby in that type of situation when he was struggling the way that he was. And another thing too is like, he hasn't had any major surgery injuries, but he's been through a lot physically to play football. And that was another thing that we had talked about. I was like, you know, this mental stuff is legit. And he's like, I would much rather it be physical. I know how to deal with physical. I know how to address physical. People, like, you can have surgery. You can do so many different things, like recovery-wise. And so for him to struggle so bad with something mentally and then us not feel like there were options that were working, that's kind of how we ended up in the facility and doing the things that we did after the facility. So, like, we were literally desperate by the time that he came home and he was not doing well again.